Hello, I'm Maria Hall Brown, and this is LA Currents. Preparing for the unthinkable, an active shooter. You can actually prepare. And fortunately, I'm joined today by Mona Curry, who's emergency manager, to tell us all about the program Run, Hide, Fight. How did the preparedness program Run, Hide, Fight within the Los Angeles Police Department get created in the first place?
Well, in 2013, we had an incident in the city of LA that kind of scared a lot of people, including myself, because our building, the building that I used to occupy, was a target in a possible active shooter threat. So from that, we started to think about, what would we do if we were in the building at work and that threat appeared? How would we respond? How would we handle it? So then about 2015, with the leadership of the LAPD, the city created kind of a coalition of different departments led by LAPD, but involved both private and public and city departments to put together this program. So 2015 is when we really kind of came online with our Run, Hide, Fight program, originating kind of in the Operations Valley Bureau of the LAPD in that training section. And it's just grown since then. We've trained almost 50,000 people.
Wow. And you'd be surprised at who should get trained and why. But let's go ahead and go through the program itself, because it's amazing that there's actually something you can tangibly and practically do in a scenario that seems impossible to manage. So there's the run. What are you supposed to do? That's the first thing you're supposed to do. And what spurs you on to run?
Well, so the program has three options. And what we do is we try to help people understand what their options are to survive. So run being the best option and the first option, and the one that you should always do if you can do, and then there's hide, and then there's fight. So the minute you hear something, you start to think something's going on. If you can run safely away from that threat, that's what you should definitely do. There might be a situation where you can't run. And again, every situation is different, because you could be in your office, you could be at your place of worship, you could be at a school, you could be at a mall, you could be at a movie theater. So you have to kind of judge your surroundings and then figure out what the best option is going to be for you at that moment.
The part about the run, the first thing that a flight attendant tells you when you go through the emergency preparedness is they point out the exits, and you learn, okay, count seats to an exit. And I never really thought about that when I'm in an environment like a workplace environment, an office environment, or a movie theater environment. It's like literally the first thing you have to do is look for not one, but a couple ways.
Exactly. So being an emergency manager, I've always taught people to know their environment, know what's above you in case of an earthquake, know your exits in case of a fire. It's the same thing with the Run, Hide, Fight. Always understand where you are. So if you're in an unfamiliar area, look for those exits. Just, have an idea of the space you're in and what you can do to protect yourself and save yourself if you need to do that. So yes, knowing where your exits are, very important. Now sometimes exit might be a non-traditional exit. So you've got your exits, which are doors, but if you're, say, on a lower level and you need to go out a window to save yourself, that could be an option too. You're gonna have to make that choice. It's all dependent on the choices that you make.
Okay, so you can't run. Either you don't know where the sound is coming from, you don't know what's happening, you're terrified out of your mind. Next move is?
Well, then you can hide. So when you hide, you have to do things to really make yourself unknown to the shooter. So you would turn off the lights if you're in a room, you would lock the door, you would find a safe area, a secure space. And also when you're hiding, you should also try to grab something. It could be this cup, it could be anything. There are plenty of things on this set that you could use to defend yourself if it came to that. Okay. While you're hiding, you still have to position yourself to defend yourself if that situation arises.
Okay, and hiding, you should be very conscientious about hiding. I mean, there's some things that you don't want to be behind a thin wall. You don't want to be behind something that is easily penetrable. You should also be thoughtful about where you hide. Heavy, solid.
Yes, yes. Now, we teach that in our training, the difference of, say, hiding behind a curtain, which kind of, stops someone from seeing you, but it doesn't really protect you if someone's shooting at you. And the difference between hiding behind some solid piece of furniture or, behind a solid wall that might protect you a little bit more. So you definitely have to be conscious and aware of the difference between the two things.
Definitely. And how do you know when you can come out?
Well, what happens is if the building's being cleared, law enforcement has arrived, they will either slip a card under the door, kind of alerting you that, they are the genuine people there to save you, or you just kind of have to wait until you come to some sort of understanding that it's safe to come out.
And then the last part, fight. And that's obviously something that you hope no one has to get to that point, but you also have to prepare yourself that if it gets that dire, it's you or them.
So fight is the last option. It's the least desirable option. But if you have no other options, you're going to fight. So you have to commit yourself to that act, because if you're making that choice, you're at a very serious point in the whole incident. It's life or death at this point. So you've got to commit yourself to that act and be, 100% behind it. I am going to fight. I am going to survive. So at that point, you would have hopefully, looked at your surroundings and found something to use as a weapon.
So I wouldn't use the cup if I was here. Wouldn't I use my chair? If I could manage it, wouldn't I use something as big as I could find?
Yeah, sure. Anything can be a weapon.
Okay.
You could pull off, that stool. You could pull off anything the clock off the wall. Anything that is solid enough. Sometimes you can, if there's more than one person could be a distraction, and then the second person would be the attacker.
Okay, and don't hesitate.
Don't hesitate. You cannot hesitate. You can't think twice about it. If you've committed to fight, you cannot think twice about it.
You just mentioned if, one person's distraction. How do you manage other people with you? I mean, that is something that no one is going to respond simultaneously. There's not going to be a coordinated, we know what to do right now, unless, of course, you've been thoroughly trained in a scenario with your colleagues and they're all standing there. So what do you do? Do you help somebody else? Do you take care of yourself first? Is it put your oxygen mask on and then help the kid? I mean, how is this part of the scenario?
Well, a couple things are going to happen. If someone's received the training, they're going to be, hopefully, going to be a natural leader. Okay, now someone could have received the training and still not be able to take action. We try to train people to develop a mindset, and that's also part of the training in convincing yourself that if you want to live, these are actions you're going to take. So a leader may arise. And then there may be some people who just in their mind say, I can never fight. And that's going to be their choice. It's a personal choice. Everyone has to make it. If that's the case, just like if it's time to run and you can run and that person is paralyzed and can't move, you have to also decide, I can't force you to come. You're putting my life in danger. I've got to go because I want to go home and see my kids, my grandkids, my mother, my father. So somebody might be paralyzed and you have to decide, am I going to still move forward with this or am I going to stay here with you?
Right.
And that's going to be your choice.
Right. What about people who, have some sort of disability or something like that? What's their chances in this?
Well, we a couple of years ago we developed a great video. It's called "Use Your Abilities to Survive an Active Shooter." So along with the state of California, we developed some ideas about how a person with disabilities can survive an active shooter. So number one, if it's in the workplace setting, we encourage people to develop the buddy system. So if I'm the person with the disability, then and something happens, let's say I'm hearing impaired, I would hope that you would come to me, if possible, if you're close to me, if you're not putting yourself in danger, you know, and say, hey, let's go, something's happening, and I would go. And then also we teach people, don't ever just give up. Use your abilities, whatever abilities you have. And also, if someone has a mobility disability, so that they're maybe in a wheelchair assisted living device, you know, we even taught in the video, take the part out where your foot goes and use that as a weapon.
Oh,
I mean, everybody should have a chance. Don't just give up. And I encourage everyone to view that video.
Does it frighten you that there's a need for a program like this? I mean, are we watching an increase? It obviously captures our attention when we see it on the news, and it's terrifying. And I remember very clearly somebody I knew was in the Vegas shooting, and the complete and total what's going on, because they were just filming the concert and then had the video running as they're crouching and running. Is it increasing? Are we hoping that there's going to be an abatement? Is it frightening to you that we need a program like this?
It's very frightening that we had to actually develop this program, but we have to, you know, we can't bury our head in the sand. So we have to face this reality. And I think the new reality is that active shooters exist in America, even at a higher rate than in many other countries. America seems to be the hotbed for active shooters. For 2019 alone, there were 28 incidents, and 5 of those were in California. So here we are, fast forward to 2020. We haven't seen many incidents, of course, because of COVID. You know, a lot of people are not even going out, so those big crowds, you know, up until now weren't, you know, they weren't opportunities for mass shootings, and that's the real goal of an active shooter, is to kill as many people as possible. So with people staying home, you know, we haven't seen many incidents in 2020, but yes, so they are definitely on the rise.
What about children? You know, it's easy for us as adults to sit here and, you know, talk about this intellectually, but how do you share this with children and not scare them and make sure that they're not being, you know, seeded with fear, but they're also prepared?
You know, for our trainings in general, we don't usually train young children. Now, LAUSD here in Los Angeles, we don't go into the schools and do that training. They have their own set of training. For the private schools around the city, we have done some training, but mostly for the high school age. So we're really not tapping into those younger age, because it is a very delicate situation. You know, the goal is not to scare children, although I'm sure, you know, it's around them and they're, you know, on some level aware of it. But that's not something that we usually goal for our training, you know.
Now, if someone wants to learn about this program, perhaps have someone come and speak to their church, or if we ever gather together, or even have a Zoom meeting or something like that, how do they get in touch?
Well, you know, that's an interesting thing, because of COVID, we are doing less and less training. So we're in the process of trying to put our training online.
Okay.
Now, you can go and Google, you know, Run, Hide, Fight training, and you'll see lots of different training videos. But what we're going to do, which is going to make it different, is we're going to kind of train to the way we usually train, kind of in person, but we're going to film that with different trainers, and then we're going to have a Q&A from an audience. So it's going to be as realistic as possible. We're going to hopefully get that online within the next couple of months, because we're not able to go out and deliver the training in person like we used to.
Thank you for all of this information. Scary as it is, but important as well.
Thank you.
If there's ever an active shooter in your workplace, act immediately. Choose your best option and do it. Your first clue that there is an active shooter could be the sound of gunshots or a warning from a coworker. In that case, your most ideal response is to evacuate the premises, get out, and get to a safe location. Ideally, you should always know of at least 2 different ways to get out, no matter where you are. Accessible exits may be limited, so individuals with disabilities or access and functional needs should always plan ahead.
Welcome back. We're talking about keeping yourself safe in a very scary situation, and I'm very delighted to be joined by Commander Alan Hamilton of the LAPD. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for having me.
You know, I was talking with Mona about the Run, Hide, Fight program, but from your perspective, why is it important for people to be prepared for something like this?
Well, what we like to do on the Los Angeles Police Department is make sure that people know that although these instances are rare, you have to be prepared for them. We ask people to have a certain amount of awareness before these incidents even happen, so that if you do encounter an active shooter or an active assaulter, you've kind of thought out what you're going to do. If you have family, friends, if you're in a vulnerable situation where you're in an enclosed area, always have a plan. And really, Run, Hide, Fight is part of that pre-planning, so that if you go into a situation and you are unfortunate enough to encounter an active shooter or an active assault, you have the ability to think ahead, to plan ahead, and to get you and your loved ones to a safe environment.
It's important for law enforcement as well, because I know that there have been scenarios in which, you know, it's early days, it's a long time ago, but
Yes.
there was, you know, confrontations within stations.
Sure. I mean, we've had that here on the Los Angeles Police Department. Unfortunately, we've had incidents in West of Los Angeles Division on Purdue Avenue where we had someone come in and actively assault officers inside of a police station. That's also happened in our West Bureau office over in the Mid-Wilshire area. There have been instances, I'm sure people have seen the instances, for instance, in Detroit Police Department at the front desk. It can happen anywhere at any time. So the awareness is important when you're out in public.
It's not just, you know, these rare incidents of active shooters. There are, you know, assaults and terrible things that happen on streets more often. So if you are a witness to something, say perhaps you're outside and somebody is, you know, there's a confrontation around you or beside you or near you, do the same principles apply of how you should react? You should run away immediately, you should hide, and that kind of thing?
Yeah, well, so if you're a witness to a crime, for instance, and you're not in an enclosed area or somewhere where you can't escape, make a phone call, call 911. That's a little different. If you're in an enclosed area, maybe 2 people are in some kind of an altercation,
Right.
one produces a weapon of
Right.
some type. That wouldn't quite be the same level of an active shooter or an active assaulter, but the first thing you want to do is notify the authorities and call 911.
And should you hide? Should you get away? Should you?
If it's not safe to observe and someone is actually armed with a firearm, then you should get away from, you should remove yourself from the situation. If you cannot run, you should definitely, you know, hide if you have the ability. But that first notification to law enforcement is crucial, because we need to start getting situational awareness as we're responding to the scene.
So if you are in a scenario, perhaps you're in an active shooter scenario, what can you expect from the police when they arrive?
Generally, any law enforcement response, whether it's the Los Angeles Police Department, the Sheriff's Department, school police, airport police, we all train together. So we all have universal principles we use in response. And we train to a standard so that we know what the other officers are going to do in these situations. For instance, in preparation for school incidents, we train very closely and we're well integrated with the school police department. So the first thing you should expect if there's an active shooter or an active assaulter is that the Los Angeles Police Department certainly is going to respond, and we're going to attempt to contact the person that's causing the harm. Mm-hmm. So the most important thing for us when we get on scene is to find out who's injured and where the active shooter is. So we're really only concerned with those 2 things, because the officers that are going to follow on and come behind us are going to be initiating a rescue while the other officers encounter the suspect. We're going to actively seek to encounter the suspect and neutralize the threat, our threats. And the follow-on officers are going to be assigned with rescue, extraction, and making sure that medical needs are taken care of.
So you should wait for the police to come to you. You shouldn't go to the police in that scenario because they might not necessarily know, who you are in that situation.
So if you're in a situation where we have someone responding
Right.
and they encounter you, if you're running from the location, you should stop and provide whatever information, whatever solid information you have, as quickly and as cogently as you can to the officers, because that information is key. That's going to be crucial going downrange trying to contact the suspects. We also want to know about any devices that may be hazardous. We want to know about any additional weapons, any additional suspects, because all of those things are threats. Mm-hmm. Once that threat is mitigated, we're going to need to make sure that people that are injured are taken care of and they're removed and extracted to a safe location to start immediate care, and then probably extract them to the nearest hospital.
I don't think I would even understand or recognize the sound of something happening. I mean, how can you tell that it's not just,
Having been at the North Hollywood shootout, it becomes quickly apparent. So,
Seriously?
When there's an active shooter, especially if they have high caliber weapons, there will be no mistaking what's going on. So, the first thing to do is grab your loved ones and remove yourself from that area. We always want to minimize the number of victims that are impacted by the actions of an active shooter.
Do we have any information? I mean, do we know what the triggers are? Have we learned anything about someone who gives themselves permission to follow up on an agenda like this? Have we learned anything over the last few years?
Yeah, so there have been a lot of studies. Most of the studies indicate that the stereotypical, as it's often said, active shooter is often described as someone with political means and motivation, or someone that has an axe to grind with society kind of thing. And what we found is you'll read some of the studies that are done by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Department of Homeland Security, et cetera. What you'll find is there are many different reasons and causes. It runs the gamut from people that feel they've been slighted by society or by maybe a workplace conflict or a romantic relationship, all the way to people that have ideological motivations behind their assault. Absolutely, terrorism comes to mind. But there are many, many different factors. In the perplexing thing about active shooters is because of the variety of different motivations that you can have, it can happen in all parts of society. It can happen in the mall in the well-to-do area. It can happen in a warehouse in an area that's known for light industry. It can happen at the port where something is occurring. There's some kind of shipping or something like that going on. I mean, there are so many myriad number of possibilities where an active shooter or an active assaulter can come into play. And that is what worries the public because of the randomness.
Yes, the randomness and the horror and the complete confusion as to why it would ever happen at all. Did you just a few minutes ago tell me that you had been in an environment in which there was an active shooter?
Yeah, so years ago, back when I was working with the Los Angeles Police Department, I was actually on my way to the San Fernando Valley when the North Hollywood shootout happened.
Oh, for heaven's sakes.
Unfortunately, I was caught up in that situation. Fortunately, my partner and I weren't hurt. We were kind of on the outer marker of the area right when it was coming to a conclusion. But you can... You rest assured, you will know what that sound of an active shooter, especially if they have automatic weapons or high caliber weapons. You'll know that there's an active assault going on. There will be very little confusion about it unless you're on a movie set. And you immediately have to recognize that threat, especially if you're with other family, friends, loved ones. You have to immediately recognize that threat and remove yourself from that area if you can.
Can you really prepare for something that horrific?
Well, you can. I mean, so some of the principles that we discuss, have an awareness of your surroundings. That is the most important thing, is when you're out in public, have an awareness of your surroundings. Have an awareness of where your loved ones are. where is the exit if something were to occur in here? If you go to a movie theater, do you pre-identify where the exits are so that if there's an incident, you know where to go if something happens? When you go to a large, let's say a sporting venue or something like that, do you know how far you are from an exit? Do you know that once you get outside, you can get to a parking structure that's going to provide cover for you to flee, or even if you can't flee, for you to hide? You know, having an awareness of those kinds of things are crucial, especially if it's a place where you go commonly with your family and friends. Having the layout in your head, knowing how you're going to react if something happens. That pre-planning, in law enforcement, we pre-plan everything. I mean, to a T. So we are used to pre-planning. What we try to program people to do in Run, Hide, and Fight is a little advanced thinking. You know, if this happens, what am I going to do? If this happens, how do I get my family to safety? Should I avoid this area or be in this situation because it's just not going to be unsafe if something happens? Those are the kind of things that we try to get people to consider. Or let's flip the script a little bit and talk about an open area like a beach.
Sure.
So a beach, you're not going to really have access to a hiding location. But if you flee, where are you going to flee to? And then what's your next move after you flee? So those kind of things, you know, if you run from a location, what is the next move after you've removed yourself to get the maximum amount of safety for you and your family and your loved ones?
And then you made me think of something else. I mean, you know, in an outside environment, sometimes the weapon is not a gun. Sometimes the
Correct.
weapon is a vehicle.
Here's the thing. So a vehicle can only go so many places on its wheels. So what you would want to consider is, how can I be where the vehicle can't get
go.
to? Exactly. That's the primary place where you want to go. And again, just like we don't advise unless it's absolutely necessary for someone to try and attack an assaulter, we don't advise anyone trying to stop a car. That's not feasible. The best, and especially with the limited mobility and access of a vehicle, just get out of the way of where a vehicle would be. Now let's talk about sharp-edged weapons attacks, knives, etc. We've had that situation here in Los Angeles recently where there was a suspect with a knife in the Baldwin Hills Mall. Where that's happened approximately a year and a half ago. So these things happen where people have a knife or a machete or something like that, which, by the way, is just as deadly as a lot of other deadly weapons, and they'll go about trying to injure people. So you have to remember the range of the person with a knife is going to be very limited for them to have an effect on you. That makes it even more critical to quickly increase the distance between you and the person that's armed with the weapon. So right there, that would absolutely immediately call for running and getting away. And you know, as long as you can create those few feet of distance initially and continue to flee from the area, you should be just fine with someone with a knife. But you never want to go into an enclosed area where you're trapped in. As we see in the UK quite often, they'll trap people into a location and they'll stab or slash multiple people in a knife attack.
So here's my last question. What's the worst thing someone can do in a scenario? Whether it be an active shooter, whether it be a vehicle assault or a knife assault, what's the thing you don't want anyone to do?
Well,
pull out their phone and take a picture.
Yeah. So there. Well, let me talk about that for a moment.
Okay.
We live in a society where social media is king, and we see that response of, hey, I think I'm going to take a picture of this. Okay. So it's run, hide, and fight. It is not run, hide, fight, and post this to the internet.
Right.
You need to get out of there and take care of your personal safety first. Really, one of the primary things you need to do is silence your phone or turn it off. Because if you've lost your opportunity to run and now you've transitioned to a scenario where you have to hide, that phone is going to give your location away.
Right.
If it's darkness, if it's hours of darkness or an area that's dark and that phone lights up, you've just given your location away. So that phone needs to be turned off. As far as putting things on social media, trying to get pictures and all of that other stuff, your priority is you and your loved ones and your safety.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate all of this very important information, albeit I hope nobody has to use it ever, ever, ever.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap on this LA Currents. Stay safe.